Mr. Rusty Kennington, thank you so much for being here with us.
It's my pleasure.
This is the Center of Excellence for Digital Ethics at Dallas Baptist University, and we have the real privilege of having you with us to discuss, of course, important topics on digital ethics. You are very famous in our space, in the industry, as well as in the Metroplex. Would you give our audience a couple of minutes of background of what you've done and what you've been doing recently?
Sure. I'm currently the CIO of Course County Mattress Company. I've been in the IT industry for seems like 400 years. I began as a software engineer and really in artificial intelligence back before it was cool, and I've just grown through the ranks and managed teams and really spent a lot of time in the last decade or so in kind of the more fast-moving transformational types of things that we do.
You have many teams in your life, and you're known for coaching them so well and for leading them to success and empowering them so much. I'm pretty sure, I'm going to make an assumption, I'm pretty sure that you also embed some practices, some digital ethics practices. Mm-hmm. Would you share some of those with us?
Sure. I think ethics is the important part of that word. I think to me, whether it's digital or not, having a strong, clear view of your moral compass should guide every decision you make. It's what I do. It's what drives me to take care of my team so well and to coach them. I think that any group, any individual that's under my care should be better off for it. And so I put a lot of time and effort into that. And I think that part of my own belief system is I just believe that there's really no gray. It makes decision making easier, and I think that understand that and stay true to that, which is not always easy, depending on the situation and things like that. But to understand that there's choices we all have as humans between doing the easy thing and doing the right thing, yes. And always do the right thing, and that's kind of the core that drives me, and it's what I spend a lot of time freeing my teams to do, because most people will catch on to that ethic without having to be drilled into.
Yeah, and you've had global teams, or you have had people or people that just don't share the same framework of reference, the Christian framework. What happens when there's a sincere collision and they're really viewing it completely differently? How have you approached that in AI or in IT as a whole?
Yeah, not always well, but I'm getting better, and I think it used to irritate me initially, and then I decided, I've learned anyway, that my first job is to listen and understand the perspective from which they're coming. And very rarely you find someone who's just really that bad, that unethical, and things like this, which I deal with in a very crystal clear manner. Maybe it's a New Yorker in me, I don't know, but most of the time it's just they either weren't aware of certain repercussions and things like that, or they just prioritize. I think it's so easy for us in this business these days to let the speed, the pace, and the direction of all the changes that we're driving to let core ethical things be some of the first casualties, yes. And I point that out. I just get them back onto the table. And I'm not an expert at it myself. I mean, I'm sure I've left some of those in my wake as well. But it's like I said, it's something important to me. So I tend to listen first, and people tend to get their guard down, and then I share.
Being that AI is a very comfortable space for you, and being that we are all in one way or another product of or embedded in AI, that seems to be, from the center's perspective, a good bridge to have ethical dialogues, because we all want to know, hey, what's happening inside of that black box or yellow box or whatever it is, right. And how transparent is it, and how explainable is it, and how accountable are we for that? Do you see that as a good bridge back to some folks just not knowing, education on that? Do you see that as a good element or agent of having the dialogue for ethics as a whole?
I think it's a great idea, and as I mentioned, I began in artificial intelligence and in the AI lab at where I went to school, and we used expert systems at the time, which meant hundreds or thousands of specific rules were in this system and were applied based on the scenario. But it was always explainable. And today, it's a completely different model. Much more math and statistical models and things like this. And in the last 5 years, folks at, let's say, financial institutions and some others have learned the hard way that they can't use those systems, because if they can't explain why this person didn't get a loan or something like that, they're at significant risk, and so for all the right reasons. And so I think that it's a great venue and a great reason to have the conversation, because everything's driven on data with these systems and with everything we're doing. And data is what it is. It's not necessarily right, it's not necessarily clean, and it's definitely not necessarily complete. And I think that if we have these black box systems, to use your word, which is a great way to characterize it, there's significant risk in doing that. And I do think it's our job, whether we're just leading teams that didn't create the technology, it's our job to understand how it operates, what its weaknesses are, and to be honest about it. That doesn't mean we kill all the projects. It just means we go in eyes wide open, understand where the shortcomings are, have conversations with people smarter than us, and pretty much everyone I talk to is going to be smarter than me, and figure out ways to get around it. And I think we can all get better, and that the rising tide, will float all boats. So that's the way I look at it.
I like that. Bring me back to the explainable component. Just because explainability has levels within it, so we can potentially understand why a decision was made. It doesn't mean that we can necessarily point it back algorithmically to how those, and you can speak to this much better than me, but how exactly it occurred, that decision making occurred, to come up with that one element that was the reason for the decision to be made, or how those computations were made. As it accelerates, as AI matures more and more, we're finding that people are challenged with being able to explain more than just this is what triggered the answer, especially in cases of litigation. Do you see a risk mitigation path around that, or an issue remediation?
Well, that's a great question. The short answer is there's always one, a risk mitigation path. I think that I don't have a specific answer to it because I don't specialize in the statistical methods that we've got now. But I do think, at 10,000 feet, I would look at making sure that someone in the conversation really understood the strengths and weaknesses of the algorithms used, and they all have them. I would make sure someone also understood what the goals of the system are. What kinds of decisions are we trying to make? And then someone else in the conversation needs to also understand it pretty deeply too, the nature of the data that we have. So what blind spots do we have in the data? In addition to biases, but what blind spots do we have? What information should be applied to get the outcomes that we need that may or may not be in the data? And I think that's where I would start. But I always believe that there's a path forward.
So the quantifiable aspect of whether we're doing something right or wrong, or maybe the quality aspect is maybe not as strong. Quality management perhaps is not as strong in the AI world as it is in other areas that have been around for, right?
Yeah.
Of a lot longer, many
Yeah.
more years. Do you see QMS coming through and having true algorithmic auditors that can understand, have both compliance with best practices, understanding and knowledge, as well as a true algorithmic knowledge, be able to say, well, this was badly done, this is exactly why? Or do you think that that's going to be so difficult to find individuals who can do that?
Great question. I certainly think it's difficult. Agree with that. I absolutely believe it's doable. I'm willing to bet you, and I know there are certain aspects of this they're really getting scrutinized. I mean, most people kind of half-jokingly describe data scientists as data janitors, and so I think there's a belief and the ownership of stewardship of the data, but that's just a small part of what you talked about. I think the algorithm side is a very interesting concept to understand the sanctity of the algorithms that we're using, and are we maintaining that sanctity, but I am willing to bet that there isn't in a strong way, holistic governance over that and over the quality of the entire process. Much of the data comes from operational systems, typically, and there's historically been, better or worse, depending on the company, but historically been QMS regarding operational systems and that data. But that's not all we're using. We're using public data, government data, industry data, all those guys. Even we're doing all that. And I can't say that there's a lot of screening going on, and I think probably one of our biggest and easiest to fix flaws is that we just assume that that's done with that body of data that we get, particularly when it's from outside of our company. So yeah, that's a great question.
So there's potentially a business that can be executed based on that. I mean, I think that bringing it back to trust, when you first started in AI and AI today, would you say there was more or less the same concern about the trust in the exercises of AI?
That's a great question. When I was building expert systems, they didn't involve the massive amounts of data that we got. And I think some of my early work was in classified DoD type work. So yeah, we had to make sure we knew what we were talking about. Lives were at stake. But I think the data sets were governed, to your point. I mean, there's satellite imagery and things like that. But the focus of these expert systems was very fine-tuned, very small. And it's very different from a lot of the more powerful AI work that's going on now, where they want more general knowledge and things like that. And you see a lot of companies like Google doing that. But these are very specialized, very fine-tuned, and experts in that space were neck deep in the development and testing and exercising of that system. So I think there was a lot of attention on it, but it was a smaller horse.
Was it also more proportionate, perhaps? There was an outcome that was expected, and the amount of effort and time and tools put into it was proportionate to that outcome?
Yeah.
And do you see that happening today?
The thing that this conversation brings to mind about what's going on today is, we know outcome and with when we have supervised training of these systems and things like that. But as we take those models and apply them to new situations, I don't know how well we can vet the expected outcome from the actual outcome and really explore why. So I think, and there's a lot of smart people working on this. So I'm sure there's many that are, but I think generally speaking, the application areas are larger and broader. The types of decisions coming out of a particular system are probably broader. The data going in, much more broad. And then it's largely dark in terms of the process that gets from A to B. And I think for those reasons, there should be a tremendous amount of attention and scrutiny and really assume it's wrong.
Wow.
Until it's proven right. You know what I mean?
That's pretty powerful, and I like that because that forces us to be more diligent and to place, again, back to governance. Governance is so powerful.
Right.
But we don't practice it well, we don't teach it well, we don't make it attractive for organizations to hold it and to maintain it and to make it sustainable.
And it needs a marketing team.
It does.
It's like audit, and
Yes.
and I've done audit, but I think today when we're moving so quickly and there's such an urgency placed on enabling certain new technologies and the things that will transform the way a business operates. Things like governance, just everyone thinks it's putting the brakes on it, And I had a friend of mine who was a Porsche driver, and he said he doesn't love the car for how fast it goes from 0 to 60. He bought the car for how fast it goes from 60 to 0.
Oh, wow.
And I think the right kind of braking system, the right kind of steering system, these are the things that allow you to go fast. And it was an eye opener for me. Because I didn't like anybody getting in my way either, but I've learned that governance and structure can be used. Sometimes it's just the person running it can really just bring things to their knees, but it doesn't have to. It's not the topic. That's the person and their approach to it. You can have governance and program management and all these other things, audit, whatever you want to think about. and it can actually fuel acceleration.
It does.
And I think that when you want to go that fast, and you know you're taking care of those things, dotting those I's and crossing those T's, then your outcomes are going to be a lot better.
And it's a biblical formula too. I mean, it's as old as time, right? Just doing it right to begin with.
Right.
And it's we're doing it for God, and then the rest is utterly accelerated.
Yeah.
So,
At the pace it should be.
the base it should be. The crisis that we have right now, how has it shaped your thoughts in terms of digital ethics?
Whoa, there's a lot going on. I mean, I think we still have the challenges within a company, the re-engineering, you know, how we do what we do, the pace, the urgency, lives are at stake or jobs are at stake, and those kinds of things. So people are even more willing now to shed baggage, right? Anything they think will slow them down, or unnecessary departments and things like that. And so we run the risk of really shedding too much, and kind of, well, we'll come back and apply governance later, you know, or do those things. And so we've got that risk. But then you see what's going on outside companies, and where you're looking at contact tracing and things like this, and everyone is so much more willing, it seems anyway, to just give up their freedoms. Even working from home is just kind of the metaphor now, where lockdown and things like this, it was meant to really avoid overwhelming hospitals. They're not overwhelmed anymore, you know, so I think we've just got to be smart about not letting a crisis cloud our vision. I think that there's way too many opportunities for certain things to come in. I know that 911 and things like that can track my location. I'm okay with that, but it's within its boundaries, you know. And it's not like I worry about where I'm going or anybody finding out. Just what is truly their business.
Necessary.
Yeah.
Now, as the technologies, we get to understand a little bit more about the effects of that. Somebody that is not, what would you say would be a good starting point for them to start thinking about that proportionality for themselves? Which apps should I keep? What location services should I still have open? Where would you guide a family member that says, I don't even know where to start, show me?
Yeah, now you brought it up. I was going to say, well, here's what the conversations I've had with my kids, and you know, I've got two, and actually the older one of the two, I think, is a little bit more reckless with his data than my younger one, and you know, I just think, and I don't paint with a broad brush, and all millennials do this or anything like that. Just my two small data points. I try to shed light on what's possible. And nobody likes to think that a government, you know, or people, government is people. And,
That's right.
And that people would be that unethical when they're not that unethical. And so part of what I try to get to is this discussion on examples of humanity being that unethical, whether it's our country or not, it's a person. And really then, so I get the risk side of the conversation on the table. And then I look at the reward side. And so is the reward of you know, organizing all your data via, you pick the platform but it's public, and we know they're all looking at everything. Google and the rest of those folks are they know way too much. And I don't even browse that way. You know, I'll use some other product or something like this, or my son will actually go to incognito mode. And so I think he's learning. And you know, maybe it's my upbringing in the projects where I don't naturally trust. Yeah, and,
start with zero trust.
Yeah, but I do think it's again, I have to try to understand why are they thinking that way, and what frame of reference do they have, and maybe I can add color to that frame of reference. I may be able to learn something too, but yeah, I think it's risk and reward like anything else, like going outside or choosing to shake somebody's hand, or you know, taking a new job, or do what you're going to do. It's always risk and reward, and I try to teach those things.
So we come from a world where we knew the physical and now the digital, and we remember the days without so much digital, but we have a brand new generation that does not know that. So some of our own DBU students, some undergraduate students, say, what do you mean just the physical? I've grown up with all of these gadgets. How how do we instill in them the due diligence of being mindful that it's not just about them, but the decisions that we make as we consume these practices, and we allow ourselves to be the product of some of the organizations, we're also affecting somebody else. How would you have a conversation in your workplace where people can begin just getting hired and being very young?
Yeah, I think it's all right. I spent a lot of time doing that, and I mentioned earlier about leading and developing people and getting them to think of others, and it's not a hard thing to do, but when we're younger, we don't do that. It's just not our natural state. We're being led, usually, and we're individuals trying to figure out who we are, and I think that I really create a lot of conversation around getting out of your skin, getting out of who you are and understanding the opportunity. And yeah, there's an obligation, I think, in the faith that we share, but there's an opportunity to leave that trail every day, every minute of every day, when you can, and to have that kind of influence on somebody else. And I think when you learn, and that's love to me, and so when you learn to love God's children and to just the people around you, the customers that are entrusting you with their day, whoever it is, it changes perspective, and you can begin, even younger folks can really grab on to the fact that, I can take a moment here and think about how this is going to affect that person. They're super smart. There's no reason. It just took time on the planet, to develop that, and for me to become less selfish. And I think that's really what it took me. And I think there's just this natural focus on self. Because growing up's a tough thing. I mean, you're trying to figure out who you are, where you're going, what are you going to do next, and what are you going to do after college, and all this. I mean, those are big questions, and it's understandable that they have, that's kind of the center of their mind's world, and I think it just takes time and conversation and mentoring to really allow them to take a break from that and understand that the path that's ahead of them is a path where they can serve, no matter what role they are, and like that. And serving is a gift. I mean, it's the thing I love the most, and so I think teaching them that to serve is just, it's a great thing. And you can serve while you're still figuring out who you are and do these kinds of things. It doesn't have to be big things. You don't have to leave and build churches in some other country or anything like that. And so that's not the only way to serve, And so I think that once you have this service mindset, you become a better steward of the things that would affect them. And I think so. I like to start with that purpose, that sense of purpose, and then the things that you do in your day should reflect that. It kind of adjusts the needle on that moral compass, I think.
We have a global audience, and some of the concepts that we're sharing, or the ideas or the practices, are pretty foreign to some folks that actually have not tasted of them. We don't know what that is like, because they have been taught very differently. They have been taught that you develop and you leverage AI, for instance, to come out in the offensive to other countries or to other entities. How do we start the conversation with folks, in your opinion? Some of them end up in my domain, so I've had to initiate that. But I'm curious to see, how would you begin to just show them there's another world, there's another way of doing business and of getting the most out of business and life, and it does not need to be as a result of consuming somebody else.
Great question. You said something really important in it, and I think you said, how do you show them? Which is different than how do you tell them.
Yes.
And I think that for me, my hope is that the light that I reflect at least draws them close enough to where they ask why. And so everything that I do should reflect that core belief that I've got, and then that belief is based in love, like I mentioned. And I think that if they can see that you can execute professionally, that you can really make a difference in the company that you're in, and yet you can also be impactful in the community around you, whether it's professional, personal, things like that. And it's all coming from this same flame. I then share but I don't, I'm not selling, I'm just telling. And I think when that's the second step, the first is showing, just being who you are, and the way you do what you do. And if you're doing it right, I think it draws people to you. At least make them curious, and I think that's what I like to do. I certainly share my faith, and how it permeates every aspect of my life. And it didn't used to, not 10 years ago, maybe it was kind of, maybe 15, it was taboo to bring up your faith and work. And I kind of followed that a little bit. And if they got to know me, then they'd know and everything like that. I'm not shameful about it at all. And, but they see first the way I am, my ethics, the kind of time I spend with my team and things like that. And so I really show and then tell.
Excellent. Now let's flip this a little bit, and let's make sure that we are giving tips for our peers or people in other professions. What if we're talking to board of directors? And what if we're talking to the chief marketing officer? How do we entice them? Well, they may not have a lot of chances to observe our behavior. We just have one moment of capturing their attention. We can bring them to another way of looking at digital ethics. What would you say?
I think it's much easier if you've got something specific that you're talking about. Board meeting, it would be more than likely. I get back to making sure that you're always going to be doing things the right way. I'll give you a quick example. Years ago, I was with another company, and I discovered, and I was an IT leader, and I discovered that we had, when we interviewed new employees, we captured a social security number, and it was kept unencrypted on thousands of machines across the country. And I was stunned. And I just said, that's going to stop. It wasn't an option. It's going to stop. And so my conversations with the board and with other leaders was that, first and foremost, these are employees. They're in our care. So we're going to walk the talk, first off. Secondly, from a business standpoint, the litigation risk is mind-blowing. I mean, this was, 100,000, employees. So it was crystal clear, and then but I brought it down to doing the right thing. We're going to do the right thing. This is where we're going to go. Yes, it's going to be money. Yes, it's going to be time, but we're fixing it. And I never had anyone say, no, we shouldn't do that. But so I think stick to your core. What's right.
Right.
I'm not sure if I answered your question.
You did. How do we make it a business advantage to those executives that maybe are willing to listen, but they just want to see, what am I really getting out of it beyond the obvious? Yes, you're telling me the customers will trust us more. You're telling me that this is the right thing to do. That's all nice, but it doesn't help me with my timeline. What you're suggesting is going to slow some things down for me. I have a deadline. I've got to roll this product out. And you're coming to me with, you're designing it all wrong. There's a few more steps here that will be more ethical to apply. That's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yep.
It's just that,
Oh, yeah.
How would you approach that?
Great question, and it has happened, and that's why people can react like that. I always look at bringing those specialties into the conversation from the beginning, because when you do that, it doesn't slow the project down. I mean, it's done right the first time.
Time is management.
Right, and so it's done right the first time. It'll actually fuel getting to the right situation faster than the alternative. And that's the story I tell you, and I've been doing it long enough that I kind of lean on that. And I've done this so many times. I'm telling you, we're doing this thing right, and we won't have to look back. I mean, it's if you have proper engineering of any product from the beginning, the product quality is going to be better, and you're going to get there faster. Bad quality at the beginning, you're going to have all problems along the way. And so, and then I have to step up and demonstrate it. But start at the beginning with the right people in the conversation.
do you see blockchain strengthening or weakening ethical behavior? Any take on that?
It's an interesting
I won't
field.
hold you to it.
No, I'm no expert in blockchain, but I have been keeping my eyes on it for years, and I do see, you know, some of the obvious things like supply chain and some of these things, and so I think it's, at least my understanding is that it can really help infuse a lot more, I don't know, quality in the process of where it's applicable, supply chain or some of these banking things, but I expect it to evolve. I really do, and I think that it's been really kind of specialty right now. I know you're familiar with it pretty well. I do think that it's going to have a place. I do. I don't know what shape it's going to be in, and I'm not using it right now myself, so I'm certainly not the right guy to ask, but I am familiar with it, and I do think that from an underpinning standpoint, that's where I think the real game changer could be.
And are you hearing in your circles more and more about quantum? And are you hearing that it'll be leveraged a bit more over the next couple of years, or is that not something that has entered your space yet?
It hasn't hit our space right now. You know, I've been curious about it, which is one step further than my level of expertise in blockchain. But I think, yeah, it's coming for sure, and it should come. I mean, all these innovations, I think what we do with it,
Yes.
I think we don't even know some of the things that will now become doable as quantum computing becomes really readily available.
So quantum plus AI, I think that's a combination that merits a lot of governance.
Oh yeah, you know, for years we've had in the technology field tools that have come along that would allow people to program faster, and it didn't make anything any better. You know, just they did bad stuff faster. You know, and I think we've got that same. If we don't start well and really care about the quality of what we're going to be computing, then computing it faster or making other things that are not really computable now computable, that could be a pretty wild horse, you know. So we've got to be really, really smart about when we're adding that kind of fuel to something that we don't steer.
Many AI projects fail. Can you tell us a bit more about that? I mean, there's just so much going on right now in AI, and a lot of organizations are bringing it in, but then they just don't know what to do with it, or what happens?
I think many projects fail, generally.
Yes.
And I think when you see the types of advantages, the reward side of what's possible in certain industries, certain companies with AI, they get willing to pour a lot more money into it. You know, so there's a fair amount of hype. There's certainly some reality and some successes, no question. But I think that, like anything else that's still fairly new, and it's still fairly new. It's been around for decades in its various forms. But I think, you know, outcomes may not have been clear. Expectations, data may not have been governed correctly. Bias in the data wasn't assumed. Whatever it is, I think. And then some of these folks I mentioned earlier, who all of a sudden they had this great system that with all this data they could run a loan application system with it, and then where they were forced to pull the plug because they couldn't explain it. And so I think, you know, one of the things I've learned just over time is any system any solution that we pursue, we've got to make sure we understand what kind of outcomes can knock this off the rails too. What assumptions are we making about our business, about the economy, about our industry, whatever it is, that make this solution no longer viable? And I didn't always do that, you know, and got blindsided every now and then, and so that's how we learn, you know. But I do think that there's some risk. We just got to be smart about it. I don't think that it's only AI projects that are failing, but I do think that given the amount of hype and all the vendors coming out of the woodwork that say, hey, we do this,
Right.
And they really don't. You know, and if you're just approaching it as a math problem, it's just write the check and burn it. I think, but yeah, I think so. You have the right approach to the program itself. I think you've got a much better chance of being successful.
It comes back to value, right? The value
Yeah.
of what you're producing.
Right.
And I hear a lot of younger people in technology say, yeah, you told me about quality, but it doesn't get rewarded. As a matter of fact, we see a lot of the approaches and methodologies focusing on the very opposite. It is dictated to do not worry about the quality so much, just keep on doing it and get it to just enough. And we hear about, of course, the minimum viable product or minimum lovable product or whatever variation of that there is. So the incentive is not there for them to focus first on the quality, then on the ethics of it. How do you foster that, nevertheless, in an environment that you know the organization as a whole, you may appreciate it with your team, but as a whole, it doesn't count. How would you still push through and say, but it is the right thing to do? But they say, okay, but help me further. Help me. Why should I? Why do I spend time on this?
Yeah, great question. Wow, these are really good questions. I think, and I'm also one of those proponents that don't let perfect get in the way of progress, depending on where you are in the project. But you got to begin with why quality is important, and make sure that you don't lose sight of it along the way. Now, you may have in any particular, release or sprint or whatever, where you worked on some aspect of the system that wasn't really focused on the quality, and that's okay so long as you don't lose track, and you don't all of a sudden let that train run off in a different direction. I do think that it's important for folks like me to make sure it's constantly on the mind of executives, the board, sponsors, whoever it's going to be. Why quality? It's a start with the why. Just saying quality, just saying it's not the IT standard or this, that, is meaningless. I've never liked that. It's always why. Why is it the IT standard? I mean, talk about the why. And so we have to be articulate enough and bilingual, if you will, in being able to speak to business outcome risks or whatever it is. We've got to speak that language. The why has to be there. If it's not, then we should question it.
Yes.
Right? And
Yes.
so if quality, governance, audit, various technologies that we're looking to put into play, they all have to support the most important whys, and those are business whys.
You bring up an excellent point, because so much of what we follow now in compliance, even within the quality world, was meant to be a guidance, and to some extent was meant to be interpreted, but we've just used it as a checklist.
Right.
So it's become, we're not thinking as a whole, as technologists, there's just no time, we're rushing, so just get it done based on whatever it is, COVID, ISO, etc. And it was not meant to be that way. It was meant to be analyzed and consumed in a manner that says, let's take these practices but make them very real for us and understand the why. Which in a way dishonors the purpose, the original purpose, and makes the business not find it very attractive. Like, I know you're just doing a compliance exercise, so what's the point?
Yeah, it's lost. We have to be intentional, but this is where it's so important. I keep going back to being grounded, in the way we want to do what we do. I mean, doing the right thing, not the easy thing. And so I absolutely believe that we both can win. Now, it may not be the 2-month span that they wanted. It may be 3 months, but it won't be 2 months and 2 years. That's not the choice we're forcing people to make. But to me, it's not an option. Just not the way anything that's associated with my name and my day is going to be done right. Now, I'm kind of known for getting things done quickly, for sure, but you can't cut those kinds of corners. And there's a business why, right? And some of that business why is the ethics of who we want to be within our community, within our industry, and things like that. We can, for us, we sell mattresses, but we genuinely believe in the quality of life for Americans. I mean, that's kind of our core that drives the kinds of products that we develop and things that we put into them. And so, to me, I latch right onto that. And everything that we do across the board, we've got to walk the talk.
Yeah. 3 questions in one for you, or 3 requests, because we have a wide audience, and some of them are our peers, or folks in other profession that are our age. Some of them are just junior in their profession, so they're just starting up and they want to understand about digital ethics. And then the third parties are students. What would you leave them with at each stage? Invite them to consider, invite them to engage somehow, leave them with something that encourages them to get involved.
I can tell you the most satisfying part of my career is my involvement in the community. It really is. I am so fueled, and I've grown so much by the peers and the relationships that I have, you included, and with literally now hundreds of folks across ranks, across companies, and so get involved. It's mentor someone and find mentors, and but get involved, engage in the conversation. You will always grow. And for me, every now and then I contribute a little bit, but I constantly grow. And so get involved and experiment, with concepts and philosophies and things like that. So always expect to learn, to get better, and never lose sight of that compass while you're doing it.
This has been awesome. Mr. Rusty Kennington, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks,
It's
Adam.
a real privilege.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Appreciate it.